secretaries, there's still hope for those fellows. Just help them out and let them get in gear. Now, we also noted that in the next 2 or 3 years, there were frequent comments in the annals of the York Rite bodies in favor of the idea of having some kind of a home for these indigents and for their children. Finally, there was a brother from St. Louis who had a brilliant idea. He was aware of the fact that in 1886 there was going to be a national meeting, which the Masons call the Grand Encampment of Knights Templar. You know, those are the fellows with the fuzzy hats. And he succeeded in selling these officers on the idea that they ought to establish a charity day during that grand encampment and also have a lot of good old music and everybody beat. They had beat in those days too. So on that beautiful day on the 21st of September of 1886, they had music, 2,000 musicians. And oh yes, it was interesting that in the program that night, it shows that the band played the Anvil Chorus. Now you haven't heard all of it yet, because they provided for 1,000 anvils. And I'll tell you, as the ringing of 1,000 anvils bellowed across northeastern Missouri, it must have been a dramatic event. And I've never heard how many lame horses there were because the blacksmiths were using all the anvils. But for our purposes, it's perhaps more important to recognize that on that one day, the 21st of September of 1886, those Knights Templars friends raised on that charity day for the benefit of an organization to be developed in Missouri $35,113. And for our present purposes, my friends, you could add a few zeros on to that 35,000 to realize the magnitude of that kind of a gift. That served as the core amount which enabled the Masons of Missouri to proceed with the idea of developing a Masonic home. There was a petition filed in the circuit court. I always have to talk about bolts and nuts and things like that lawyers think about. But they filed a petition in the circuit court in St. Louis to establish a corporation known as the Masonic Home of Missouri. And so the judge entered a decree authorizing the establishment of this organization. And that was the beginning, from a legal standpoint, of the Masonic Home of Missouri. Now, there were a lot of things to do in connection with setting up a new corporation of this type. First of all, they had to find a place that was satisfactory to provide a home for these folks who would be cared for. Ultimately, the committee narrowed it down to 2 sites. And the one they chose had several features in favor of it. They had a 20-room mansion, which had a barn, it had a vineyard, it had a garden, and had an apple orchard. And by the time they opened the home, it also had a cow. So what more features would you need? And in 1889, 25 people were admitted to the new Masonic Home of Missouri. 16 children and 9 ladies. Now, I must say that the people in those days may have used some terms that you might not think appropriate, but in many of the writings from that day, they referred to these dear ladies as old ladies. Well, there were no men in that initial group. They were to come years later, so the old men joined later on. We had a lot of activity in those early years. New buildings, a men's building was established in 1904. There were provisions for more people to stay at the Masonic home. And so they needed to have some order. You know, Masons do believe in law and order. I happen to have a copy of the rules applicable to the residents that was in effect in 1908. Now, please bear in mind that I am not responsible for some of the terminology that was used, because I want you to understand that I would never have thought of talking about the residents as inmates. Nonetheless, rule number 1 was that the rising and the retiring bells must be properly obeyed by all the inmates and employees of the home. Rule 3, every light must be extinguished by 9:30 p.m. except for in such halls and bathrooms as the management may prescribe. Provision was made for regular attendance at chapel and, of course, on the Sabbath. Every member was assigned a duty commensurate with his or her age and ability. This one here attracts my attention. I don't know whether this applied to some of the so-called old ladies who were in residence, but number 12 provides that said throwing stones or clubs, climbing trees or fences, being on the roof of any building, or on the fire escapes, outside of porch or stair railings, or getting in and out of the windows is absolutely forbidden. So they must have emphasized the importance of this one when they said that it's absolutely forbidden. Well, these were all very worthy notes. There was also a provision in case you thought you were going to get away with something before you got to breakfast. There was a provision in Rule 28, all rooms must be swept before breakfast, parenthesis, or immediately thereafter. The windows being open at the time, unless the weather is very, very cold. The dust will be left just outside the door. The hall keeper will sweep the entire dust to the stairway or outside. So those were the rules that you had to abide by in those days. And apparently they succeeded very well. Now, we had a period of building. We found it was increasingly necessary to have cash flow. That's what you need in order to buy the bread and pay for those supplies in the bedrooms and to take care of all the expenses of operating a big operation such as the Masonic Home of Missouri. So in 1920, the Grand Lodge in its wisdom provided for $10 to be deducted from every initiation fee for a new member to provide for the operation and upkeep of the Masonic Home of Missouri. That was a key act in favor of the continuing operation of the Masonic. During the World War I period, the home had to cope with shortage of some materials. Yes, there was rationing in those days too, but the home made it through. In the 1920s, we had an enormous increase in the numbers in our fraternity. I mention that because the great number that we had of Masons in the fraternity certainly better enabled the board of directors each year to provide for the operation of the home. That was not always to continue. In just reviewing some of the reports of the activities of the home in some of those early days, I note there is a continuing reference to provision for the education of the young people living at the Masonic home. Typically, they would attend local elementary schools or the public high schools in St. Louis, and yet they also recognized the need to provide for more advanced education. Many of the people from the Masonic home attended local business colleges. And I noted in one year that there were 9 graduates of local business colleges. And at that time, there was a Masonic Employment Bureau in St. Louis. Every one of those 9 men, or young men, got a job. And they had had such good training at the Masonic home that they were successful in their business endeavors. Not only did we have students who were going to business colleges, but I noted in one year that there were 4 young ladies who were attending Washington University, thanks to the generosity and the thoughtfulness of some members of the Order of Eastern Star. And those students continued through their educational work to work on their degrees. Oh yes, there was another interesting item I thought you might be interested in. In the 1937 records, it is noted that one of the young men from the home had received an appointment to West Point. And then incidentally it pointed out they wanted to express their gratitude to a brother from Independence who had assisted in the connection with getting the appointment. It was a man I believe by the name of Truman. Yes, his first name was Harry. That's it. I couldn't think of it. In World War II, again, the home had to deal with the problem of rationing, shortages of materials, but they made it through, like most people did. By the early 1950s, we were getting a dramatic increase in the attendance at lodges. By 1956, we had 124,000 Masons in Missouri. But at the Masonic home in St. Louis, we were facing already at that time an aging group of buildings. Where we had anticipated that there would be much more room for the adults, we were finding dreadful shortages. And so in 1954, the Grand Lodge approved the building of a 10-story facility to provide essentially for health care for the people in the Masonic home. That hospital building was of tremendous benefit in the latter years of the home. In the first stage of the building of that Masonic unit, it was designed to provide for 165 beds and then also 80 ambulatory residents. They had no room at that time for couples who were in the home. So this was a new facility that was very much needed. I might point out something too, that when that facility was authorized by the Grand Lodge, it captured the attention of some wonderful, sensitive, big-hearted ladies who were members of the Order of Eastern Star. They pledged and ultimately paid $250,000 to apply on that project. Later, in the course of the building of that facility, they just tacked on another $12,000 to help to provide the furnishings in a medical facility within that building. We cannot adequately express our appreciation to the generosity of the members of the Order of Eastern Star. They had that special touch which only our dear friends, ladies who are here present, and others like them, who could recognize there were certain human needs above and beyond the ordinary. Thanks, Order of Eastern Star. I might just comment very briefly about the recognition of special events. Last night we heard a magnificent array of things that happened from the perspective of the young people who were living in the home, and all of us were deeply impressed. Donna, we certainly hope that you will convey to your friends and associates our deep appreciation for the contribution that you and the others made last night. We had these special events which would typically involve sponsorship of an event by a lodge or perhaps an OES chapter, or we had a cheer committee that also specialized in doing nice things for some nice people. On holidays, we had a wonderful, wonderful old-fashioned Thanksgiving. And then come time just before Christmas, oh, there were a lot of things going on. You had a lot of mail coming in. You had visits from neighbors and family members. You had special from the lodges. And you know, it was interesting that every year, just on the afternoon before Christmas, some kind of special arrangements were made, but it seemed that Santa Claus always succeeded in stopping at the Masonic home that afternoon before Christmas, before he proceeded with his rest of his chores around the world. The kids never forgot that. There were some special events too that I want to direct to your attention, because this is where some of our heroes come into play. In December of 1964, the board of directors approved the admission of one family of 5 children. They were very young for the most part. They continued at the board at the home for several years. But just in a few months after the admission of those 5, there was a tragic accident on the 10th of August of 1965. The father, who was a member of a local lodge in St. Louis, died immediately. His wife died the next day. There were 5 children, ranging in age from 2 to 10. There were no immediate relatives except for one uncle and aunt who were already caring for 6 children. But there were some more distantly related people who took an interest in those little children. Most Worshipful Brother George Morrison and the Vice President of the Masonic Home Board at that time, Right Worshipful Brother Lester Heckman, and the Superintendent, Lewis Robertson, got very, very busy. They talked to this uncle and aunt, who were the closest relatives to those children, and explained that in order to keep those children together, that they could arrange for them to come together to the Masonic home. They also took the senior members of that family, consisting of 2 10-year-old children, showed them the facilities at the Masonic home. Now bear in mind that their folks had just been in that awful accident on the 10th of August. Less than 2 weeks later, at the next meeting of the board of directors, those 5 children were admitted to the Masonic Home of Missouri. Words are not adequate to express the appreciation of all of us for what Most Worshipful Brother George Morrison and Right Worshipful Brother Heckman and Right Worshipful Brother Lewis Robertson did to keep that family together. This is but an example of some of the work of some of our great heroes who stepped up in a time of need and provided the necessary help. By the 1970s, there were some folks out in western Missouri who were beginning to ask the question, why can't we have a Masonic home or Masonic branch over here on the western side of the state? To that end, there were some enthusiastic people from the Kansas City area. Well, one was the brother Harry Cardinaire. They just went out and proceeded to raise $30,000. And so with the $30,000, they proceeded to buy a parcel of 23.5 acres on Bannister Road. They gave it to the Masonic Home of Missouri with the thought that that could serve as a base for a new unit. Now bear in mind that all this time that those fellows in Kansas City were talking about a new unit, we were facing a dreadful problem in St. Louis. We had an aging set of facilities. We had a home which was located in a socioeconomic bind in that security was becoming an increasing problem. With the aging facilities, we were finding that when repairs had to be made, sometimes our staff had to improvise because old parts were unavailable. Nonetheless, those optimists from Kansas City continue to work. When they gave that property to the Masonic home, the board recognized very quickly that there was a lot more to do before they could consider building a facility. You had to have zoning, which ultimately was obtained due to the wonderful and resolute determination of some Masons there in Kansas City. Bob Arnold was one. There was a wonderful brother who was a lawyer that, yes, once in a while they come in handy. There was a brother named Hoffman, did a great job in getting the zoning, and then they had to work on sewers. They had to work on utilities. Finally, and notwithstanding the negative factors I have mentioned, the board saw fit to let these enthusiastic brethren from Kansas City have an opportunity to have a Western unit. Yes, in 1983, we had a meeting to authorize the raising of funds. I know something about that because I happened to be president of the home at that time. Brother Howard Henry, who was a past potentate at Ararat Shrine Temple, he was the mayor of Harrisonville and a leading business figure in his community, assumed the responsibility of serving as the chairman of a special fundraising program, a 6-month fundraising blitzkrieg. And he did it. I can attest to that. They raised over $2 million, and thereafter, from time to time, there were supplemental amounts which were received as trust would mature to a point where there could be a payment made to the Masonic Home of Missouri. The Western unit of the Masonic Home had a groundbreaking event. I'll never forget it because it was a rainy dull-looking day, we had to spend most of the time over at Ararat Shrine Temple nearby, instead of holding umbrellas over the heads of people. But we had that Western unit go into operation in January of 1986, and for almost 30 years, that unit served a very real need in the Kansas City area. Now, ultimately, the board of directors, coping with the need to use the resources of our home most effectively, concluded that we could better and more effectively use the resources of the home through our new outreach program, a program with which our current directors had much to do in helping to perfect that wonderful program. And so ultimately on June the 30th of 2011, that facility in Kansas City on Bannister Road was sold to a very reputable nursing home facility. And since that time, the home has continued to assist eligible Masons, wives, widows, female members of the Order of Eastern Star, and eligible children through our outreach program. We covet the continued support of the outreach program so that we can continue to provide for a large number of people needing assistance from the home. Now, I've talked about the Kansas City unit. Let's turn back to the fading days of St. Louis, because, as I mentioned, there were socioeconomic problems, there were enormous security issues. We had to have police dogs to provide extra security for our staff and for our residents and for visitors. It was decided ultimately in 1989 that no further residents would be received there in St. Louis. And so the board made a decision to provide for outsourcing of the care to other very fine facilities. Contractual arrangements were made, for example, with Bethesda Dilworth, a fine organization in St. Louis. About 1990, we had a sale of the real estate, and then there was a very significant event took place in 1990 during the time that then Right Worshipful Brother Dan Cole was serving as president. It was decided that the home would quit involving in the life care system, under the terms of which a person would turn over his or her remaining assets, which would be very few, and then in return the home would provide for their care for the rest of their lives. Now, while the home agreed to honor its obligation to all of those people who had entered under the life care system, it was decided that instead of continuing that program in the future, that we would simply depend upon the pay-as-you-go program, which we now call the outreach program. To make a story very short, the home moved to St. Louis County. It went into the court in the county and received a decree recognizing it was reincorporated in the county. And then the board, to its credit, undertook a very dramatic change. They recognized that in view of the fact that our outreach program is designed to reach people where they are, whether it's in extreme southwest Missouri or northeast Missouri or in the center of the state, wherever it is, wherever they live, wherever they are, that's where the need is. And consequently, it was decided that it'd be appropriate to have the headquarters established in St. Louis, or in Columbia. And so we moved from the St. Louis area, where we had been for over 100 years, And we've been in Boone County. We received a decree from the circuit court here providing for the new location to be in Boone County. And then I'll just make things real short and point out to you that 11 years ago today, this magnificent complex was dedicated by Most Worshipful Brother Jimmy Lee, who was then serving as Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri. Yes, we've got heroes sitting out here in front of us. This facility not only provides for the headquarters of the Masonic Home of Missouri, but it also has among its favorite tenants the Grand Lodge of Missouri, the Order of Eastern Star, our good friends who have helped so much over the years, and from time to time there are arrangements made for youth groups and other Masonic-related organizations to get the benefit of using these great facilities. Yes, I think that this great organization has withstood the test of time. Reference was made to a tribute that was made many years ago by Harry Truman. He said, "The Masonic Home of Missouri, in my opinion, is reason enough for the existence of the Masonic fraternity. Even more, every man who is a member of our fraternity in Missouri ought to be proud of the fact that his contribution to the welfare of the brethren and their children." Yes, I think that is still true. But you know, we've been talking here for seemed like probably an undue period of time. But remember, we've got a lot of heroes that we've left out. Now, I just got breaking news that there's a story that's developing very rapidly, and I want to take advantage of the fact right now that we have a lot of heroes sitting out here in front of us, and it's time for us to at least recognize them because they have contributed in a very real way to the success of this venerable institution. First, I'd like to Donna and at one time lived at the Masonic Home. Just stand so we can appreciate your presence here. And since 1889, we've had a lot of people serving on the board of directors. First, I'd like to call on every man here who has served as president of the Masonic Home, because I know that he has had to spend an enormous amount of time not only preparing for the task of being president, but for discharging the responsibilities of being president. Gail, Jimmy, all the rest of you who are past presidents, will you please stand? Now, we have some dedicated people who are here who are currently serving as members of the board of directors, and we have a lot of others who have served from time to time in past years. Let's have them please stand. Great. Thank you. I might point out, I'm just going to digress just a moment here. You know, these directors come from all over this great state. They have a variety of training and experience. I'll never forget the director from Dunklin County. He was the sheriff there for many years, and when he was a director, I remember his driving up to the facility in St. Louis with a big old truck. Now, the important thing is that old truck was filled with a lot of watermelons from Dunklin County. And believe me, those residents, they had a great time enjoying those watermelons. All right, now let's go on to something else. I think we also need to recognize the wonderful members of the Order of Eastern Star who over the years have gone far beyond the line of duty in helping to make this a great and successful institution. All of you who are OES, please stand. We have some people here who have had experience in D-Malay, Job's Daughters, Rainbow Girls. How many of you are past D-Malays, Jobies, or Rainbows? Let's see, because we've appreciated your support. Thank you. Thanks for being here today. Every Mason in this meeting today, and every other Mason out across the state of Missouri, has a portion of his duties, of his dues, that are allocated to the support of the Masonic home. And as I mentioned earlier, when you're first initiated into the fraternity, there's money that's going to be set aside for the home. Let's have all of you Masons stand up, and please remember that you're not limited in your financial support of this home just because a small amount is taken out of your annual dues. Add some zeros, and let's make the next 25 or 50 or 75 years even more memorable. Come on, all you Masons, stand up. Thank you. And brethren, we apologize to the innumerable over these 125 years. May those of you who are going to be here 25 or 50 or 75 years from now do your part to make the next few years.
Thank you, most worshipful Brother Vern. Our next speaker is Timothy A. Folwer. Right worshipful Brother Folwer is a retired Army Staff Sergeant in the United States Army as a flight engineer on Chinook helicopters. He now resides in Solomon, Kansas. So what the heck is a Kansas guy doing here? Well, we're going to tell you. He lives there with his wife Joni and 4 children, Kayla, Zeb, Nisha, and Oliver. Right worshipful Brother Folwer has an extensive Masonic record that began in Missouri during the year 1966 when he was raised in Cuba, Missouri, number 312. That's not the reason, is it? 96? What did I say? That's okay. In the year 1666, that's better. He is also a member of Chapter number 398, Order of the Eastern Star. He moved to Kansas in 2005 and has been very involved in Kansas Masonic fraternity and its appendant bodies for the last 9 years. He is active in the Scottish Rite, the Royal Arch, Cryptic Masons, Red Cross of Constantine, National Sojourners, Shrine, and Job's Daughters. Right worshipful Brother Folwer has been a huge advocate for the Missouri Masonic and has been instrumental in helping Kansas establish their own outreach programs. He has experienced firsthand how the outreach programs can make a lasting difference and is here to share his personal story with us today. Tim?
Yeah, something like that. Good afternoon. I was going to kind of go into part of why I'm here from Kansas, but he kind of gave a basic description of that, so that'll cut part of my speech out, so thank you. I did grow up in Cuba, Missouri. I graduated from Cuba High School. I joined the lodge there in the Order of the Eastern Star before I joined the Army. My stepdad, my grandparents were all members of the bodies there, and so it was somewhat natural that I would continue in that tradition of the family. Grew up going to the various Masonic installations, the pancake breakfasts, all that fun stuff that you can do as a kid and a teenager. And it made me realize really what the Masonic fraternity is, and it made me want to be a part of that. So basically, on my birthday, 18th birthday, I had my petition in at Lodge, and shortly after, received my first degree. As he said, I'm a retired staff sergeant in the Army. I was a flight engineer and a door gunner in Chinook helicopters in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2005, I was in a training accident in Afghanistan and messed up my back pretty bad. I call it a crash. The Army called it a hard landing. But anyway, that's the way the records show. After going through the medical process, going to Germany and every other Air Force base on the way back to Hawaii where I was stationed, I was kind of starting to think about what am I going to do now, because I knew my career was probably over. Up in Hawaii, and they said, well, you're probably going to be medically boarded or medically retired. Well, since I was probably 15 years old, my career path was going to be retired. It's all I wanted to do, and so I had no. Shortly after, they put me on the temporary medical retirement. My home of record was Merriam, Kansas, because that's where my wife was from. So that's where the Army sent me to and paid for my shipping. And I had enough money that I could get a house, I could get started. I expected my retirement pay to start almost immediately. Like everything in the federal government, it didn't. It took probably about 6 or 7 months to get my retirement pay started. I was 27. I had a 3-year-old son at the house. And it just didn't do well for myself, my family, or even my marriage. In searching for jobs, because I figured that's the best thing I could do to get back on track, most employers didn't want to hire a guy in braces from back injuries who had 4 or 5 doctor's appointments each week. So I didn't know really what I would do. I was at the VA hospital in Kansas City, Missouri, and needed to talk to. So I went to the Masonic Service Association office there, and I knew I could at least talk to a brother. Told him my situation, and I didn't really expect much, but he said, well, the Masonic Home has a program that could probably help you out. So he gave me phone number, email address, website, and when I went home, I filled it out, the application online. And I assumed that they might be able to help with some connections on getting utility bills paid or, you know, small things that would at least help out for a little while. Well, I guess it was probably the day after I filled out the application, I had a phone call from a caseworker here. And within a couple days, she was at my house going over the information and seeing what they could do to assist me. It seemed to me that that was going to be too easy. When she was there and she was telling me, well, it looks like you would qualify and I think we can probably help you out. We just got to go to the board, but you have some immediate things and there's ways we can get around that and we can, you know, get you some immediate help. Well, probably about a week, that immediate help was there. And it covered my past due rent and things of that sort, so I wasn't worried about getting kicked out of my house or having my car repossessed or having my utilities turned off. So that was really quick, and then a few months after that, I continued to receive monthly assistance to help pay those bills until the Army started to pay me and get back on track. I jumped ahead on my speech, so. And as I've said, during the hard times, you know, I was having problems with my family. You know, when you get married at a young age, you don't expect to, first off, go to war, second off, get injured in war, and then your wife standing there next to you. It wasn't necessarily everything that she thought she signed up for. So when I had nobody with me even my wife had left, I did have the Masonic fraternity. And as a Master Mason and a soldier, that's a principle I had been taught, but I honestly never thought that when I was broken in the Army that the Masonic fraternity would be there to take care of me. After that, things started to look up. As I said, my retirement pay started, my VA disability for being wounded in combat started, and I was able to start focus on feeling better about myself, becoming stable, and figuring out what I wanted to do in my future. Another great bend of the government, in 2007, I got a letter back from the Army saying, hey, you're called back on active duty. So I got shipped to Fort Riley, Kansas in 2007, and I was a platoon sergeant, and I trained soldiers to get ready to deploy to the unit that was already forward in Iraq. While I was at Fort Riley, I met my current wife. She's from Salina, Kansas, and we got married in 2008, and I gained 3 more children. So it was a great thing that the Army sent me to Fort Riley. In 2009, I was again retired from the Army, but this time they say it's permanent, so we'll see how that works. My wife and I bought a farmhouse and a farm just outside of the Wild West town of Abilene, Kansas, and of course was the boyhood home of President Eisenhower, and the most famous thing we're known for, Greyhound Racing Hall of Fame. Now I'm a stay-at-home dad. I devoted myself to Masonry, giving back to the community. As you heard in my introduction, I belong to about every Masonic body you could possibly belong to, and I'm an officer in most. So I haven't been taught how to say no yet, so we'll see how that works out. I was joking when they did the interview about me in the Outreach magazine that came out last summer. I was joking around and said Masonry's basically become my new job, and really it has. I've been executive secretary of the Scottish Rite Valley, which is a full-time job, and various things like that. So I basically took Masonry and made it my job. Last year, I guess it was probably about this time of the year, I was at a meeting with the Grand Lodge officers of Kansas, the Grand Master, Deputy Grand Master, and they were asking what we thought Kansas Masonry did well and what we thought we needed improvements in. I decided to tell them this story about how the Masonic Home of Missouri helped me. I don't know if it was from embarrassment or what, but they were shocked that Missouri had such a great program and we didn't in Kansas. So the Grand Master asked myself and another brother who was at that meeting, who was also a dual member in Missouri, if we would take on the task of researching and maybe getting a program like this started in Kansas. Well, the first thing I did was get a hold of Barbara, and the brother and I drove out here to this facility, and we sat down, and she answered any question we had. I asked her, if you had to start over, how would you start it? And she gave us all kinds of ideas, and we took that forward. In March of this year at the Grand Session of Kansas, we launched a new program called Fulfilling Our Obligation. So far, and that was March, till now, we've raised over $800,000 for our endowment. And we've already assisted brethren and family members in about $15,000 worth of assistance since then. So this is all because of the Masonic Home helping me, and I feel every lodge should do that same. I will forever be indebted. And that's why I keep my membership in Cuba Lodge and Cuba Chapter. It's not much, but I do know part of it goes to this program, and I pay the extra every year to go with my dues to do a donation. And to me, if that story can make a difference. And now in a totally different state, you guys have helped create a program like this from your generosity and your assistance. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Looks like there's only one more person on the list. Most worshipful brother, John Broyles. Please come and give your remarks.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to see all of you here with us today to celebrate this wonderful anniversary of our Masonic home. When I'm asked to speak to lodges on anniversaries, I like to look a little bit about what their background is. Some may know a little bit of history about their lodge or their area, but not know all the things and how they interrelate to what's going on. So a lot of times I'll look up on the internet things that happened at the time that the lodge was chartered. And in 1889, when the Masonic home was first formed, Coca-Cola was first formed as a corporation. President Grover Cleveland admitted the states of North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Washington as states. The Eiffel Tower first opened. In 1889, it was the start of the Oklahoma Land Rush. The Wall Street Journal was first published in 1889. And the Moulin Rouge, also in Paris, was first opened. We looked at it was only a short amount of time since the Civil War had ended to this event was the Masonic home was started. But it was a great time of change in America. The Industrial Revolution had really picked up and business was flourishing, as evidenced by the Wall Street Journal. And things were happening, even in Missouri. In St. Louis, I had a friend who sent me a link on Facebook to some history about St. Louis neighborhoods. And I was just looking through it earlier this week. It's one of those serendipitous things that you get and look and somehow it makes a connection with other things that you're doing. In 1886, in the Hill area, was the section I happened to look at, the neighborhood. 1889, formed a home for the indigent. It had 250 patients, as they called them, which increased in 1881 to 343, so they were woefully overcrowded and not expanded until much later. They had the Poor Farm and Hospital in 1845, and in 1870 the City Infirmary. The community knew there was things that they had to do to help the people of their community. As our brethren are usually very active in community affairs, they knew that there was something that they had to do to help our brothers and sisters, our Masonic family. You know who are Masons, we've taken an oath to help each other in times of need if those people say they need assistance. And this is what they needed to do to help those family members, those ladies and children of other brothers who needed assistance. If you look in the history magazine, or the history book that's been given out, at the very beginning, there's a quote, and I didn't know it until I read this, but it's so appropriate. It's by the first president of the Masonic home, past Grand Master Noah G. Given. The undertaking which we have engaged is not a small one. It involves not the work of a day, or a year, or a generation even, but the united efforts of every Mason in the state for all time to come. It involves labor, sacrifice, anxiety, devotion, liberality, confidence, faith, hope, and charity. Every Mason in Missouri should feel that he has a personal interest in the home. He should esteem it as a privilege rather than a duty to give to its aid, not only now, but for every year that God may spare in his life. If everyone in the 30,000 Masons in Missouri, 1889, would voluntarily take small annual offerings to the home, It will become an incalculable blessing to our order and to all its members. The Lord loveth a cheerful giver, and our home should be the free will offering of our brethren. Such a home will become the pride of our order and receive the blessings of Almighty God. My friends, reflect on the times that this organization was started, the efforts that were put into this creation of this organization by the brethren. Most worshipful Brother Schneider mentioned many different levels of giving that were given. We had a donation of $3,000. From the Knights Templar, $35,000. $1 in 1889 is equal to $24.79 now. So a $3,000 gift would be well over $700,000 now. Can we do that? Could we take on a challenge to help our family members to that level now? I think we could. We might not want to. It would be difficult for some. But for those that have the spirit, those that have the desire, those that have brotherhood to family, we could do that. And our brother from Kansas, actually our Missouri brother, Brother Folwer, took advantage of one of the newer programs that we have. And if you talk to any of the members of the board of directors that are here, you'll know that that is a very growing program. There are so many of our younger brothers that need our help. We think of the Masonic home often as our elderly members who are entering the later stages of their lives. We are in times now that people need more assistance. Things change on them with a moment's notice. And they just need a helping hand. As you would help your own children or your family members get through a rough patch in their life. I want to tell you how proud I was of Brother Folwer when he spoke at the Grand Lodge of Kansas last year. I was fortunate enough to be at that communication when they had their opening vote and adoption of this program, and a charity auction that, I'm sorry staff here, put ours to shame. They were ready to give and be a part of developing this in their state. They were ready for that. We're ready for that. Let's do what we can to help not only the memory of our people that we assisted in those 125 years, but let's look forward and see what the next 125 years will bring. What will be the need that we need for our members, the people that believe in our ideals? What assistance are they going to need along the way? And what are we going to do to help them? For as each one of you that took that oath knows, in the end of the third degree, it says, all Master Masons are under the same obligation to you. Remember, it might be any one of you sitting here that needs that assistance. Let's be prepared. Let's take that step to be in the position to help those brothers, to be ready, to give them that need, to get through the rough patch that they may have. And you never know, as our brother, what leaders they may become, because it only takes the idea of one man at the right time, at the right place. They're ladies and the members of the Eastern Star. I want to thank you again for being here and for all of your support that you do every day for the Masonic Home. At this time, I'd like to present to you the lodges of the state of Missouri that have participated in the new Most Worshipful Brother John C. Rawls Master Builder Society program. We asked the lodges to join with us in this celebration and give according to the different levels, the groups. We had the supporter levels, which gave less than $1 per every member in their lodge. Those lodges that are at the supporter level are Herculaneum Lodge number 338. If there is a representative from the lodge, please come forward and we have certificates for those lodges. Herculaneum 338, Memphis Lodge number 16, and Gate of the Temple Lodge number 422. Let's give them a round of applause. At the bronze level, which is equal to $1 per member, and that's the entire member of their lodge, member count of their lodge, we have several. Burney Lodge number 573, Billings Lodge number 379, Brotherhood Lodge number 269, Buckner Lodge number 501, Canopy Lodge number 284, Charleston Lodge number 407, Christian Lodge number 392, Crosby Lodge number 600, Crescent Hill Lodge number 368, Cuba Lodge number 312, Edina Lodge number 291, Fellowship Lodge number 345, Granby Lodge number 514, Jefferson Lodge number 43, City Lodge number 220, Kirkwood Lodge number 484, Lathrop Lodge number 506, Leadwood Lodge number 598, Monticello Lodge number 58, Naphtali Lodge number 25, Noble Lodge number 684, Owensville Lodge number 624, Polar Star Rose Hill Lodge number 79, Rolla Lodge number 213, Sykeston Lodge number 310, Summit Lodge number 263, Troy Lodge number 34, Tyro Lodge number 12, University Lodge number 683, and Union Lodge number 593. All these lodges participated at the bronze level. Let's give them a round of applause. I'm doing good here. You guys are the ones.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.
Yeah, certainly. My pleasure. Give them a second to catch up here.
Thank you.
So you guys can get up there faster than order, I think that's
This is not how we're going to hand out certificates at Grand Lodge.
Hey! Thank you. I actually found that. Nice to shake your hand. But I'll take it off and just give it a break. Sit on now. Good to see you. Here's Tyro. Not Troy. There. We're working on it.
I'm waiting. Okay, I'm not going to do them in alphabetical order now. Okay, thank you again for those that participated at the bronze level. The next will be the silver level, and these are going to be much shorter. The silver level as $3 per member of the lodge. They are Allenville Lodge number 198, Chamois Lodge number 185, Henderson Lodge number 477, Kirksville Lodge number 105, Overland Occidental Lodge number 623, Sparta Lodge number 296, Stafford Lodge number 608, and Willard Lodge number 620. Again, let's thank them all that participated at the silver level. And finally, at the gold level, the lodges at the gold level contributed $5 for every member of their lodge. And I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order here because the first one I want to save for last.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Weston Lodge number 53, Webster Groves Lodge number 84, Pride of the West Lodge number 179, O'Sullivan Lodge number 7, Mizpah Mount Moriah Lodge number 40, Mechanicsville Lodge number 260, Hickory Hill Lodge number 211, Granite Lodge number 262, Daggett Lodge number 492, my home lodge, Adair Lodge number 366. Please give the lodges that participate at the gold level a round of applause.
Can you ask them to all go back to do one big group picture? We did them by category.
Okay.
Do you mind asking them to reconvene?
I will do that after we complete here. After we're done with this presentation here, will all the lodges representatives that are here please gather in the courtyard for a group picture.
Okay, did you want to do your special?
What? Huh?
There.
Is he here? I don't think there's a representative. I will take Adair's and make a personal presentation.
We'll announce it.
Yeah, that's okay. When we started this program, the Grand Lodge officers, the top 5 officers of the Grand Lodge advancing line, are also the top 5 officers in the Masonic Home Board. We made a commitment after we had this presented to us, and we saw what the lodges were going to do. And the Grand Lodge officers decided to match dollar for dollar up to $12,500, which is $125, whatever the lodges contributed. Through the efforts of the lodges and their contributions, they have donated $16,138.40. So if I could have the president of the board of directors up here. Brother Haywood, it is my honor on behalf of the Grand Lodge, our Grand Lodge, and the brothers here assembled and all those throughout the state, a check from the Grand Lodge of the state of Missouri for $12,500 used in the matching programs of the Masonic, which include the Creating a Partnership program and the Masonic Family Cares program. So not only are the monies that you contribute to help our membership matched with the contributions of the Grand Lodge and your contributions, even if your lodges didn't contribute, to important matching programs that are some of the programs of the Masonic.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to return the microphone to you.
Here you go.
Thank you all for coming. Please tell yourself to go to the complex after the ribbon cutting. Take a look at the new refurbished art class. Tour the museum and library, and have refreshments. Thank you again for coming.